Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to come along, even though I'm only 2 months in the door in EirGrid. It's a great opportunity to probably to meet the wind industry, who are a very important customer for ourselves. I suppose over the last year, EirGrid has spent a lot of time developing a new strategy and really trying to say, well, what are we actually going to do for the next number of years? I've come in at the end of that, and part of my job in the grid delivery area is effectively to deliver one part of it. But grid delivery is one part, the market, and there's so many other aspects of it. I just think it's worth walking you through that today. We developed the strategy in-house, and there's 150 people across EirGrid that actually contributed. And part of that was actually to define, well, what are we actually about? So one of the first things I just want to touch on, and for anyone who was there at our strategy launch at the end of September, I want to talk about our purpose. So the purpose that one of our team kind of came up with was we want to transform the power system for future generations. And there's 3 little bits I just want to touch on that. The first is the word transform. So there's various different debates, but really what we need to do with the grid between now and 2030 and beyond 2030 is not an evolution. We really need to transform so many different parts to try and achieve the climate action plan. The second thing is the power system. So the power system is the grid and the market. The two have to work together, and we recognise that there's going to be a large transformation on both to actually make it work and make it work for everyone. And for future generations, so the target is 2025, we have to hit 2030, and we have to hit beyond. But if we don't start now, and if we don't get a good run at the next couple of years, we have no chance of delivering anything in terms of 2030. So we need to focus on that. Some of the key parts of our strategy that I'm just going to talk about a little bit is our primary goal. So we've set ourselves, our primary goal is about leading Ireland's electricity sector on sustainability and decarbonisation. We have 3 supporting goals that are very, very key to that. To operate and develop and enhance the All-Ireland grid and market, to work with partners for positive change, and to engage for the better outcomes for all. In terms of leading the island's electricity sector on sustainability and decarbonisation, the big challenge there is we have to set out a number of targets for ourselves, and so many other parts have to set out some challenges for ourselves. We can't do it on our own. We recognise that we have to play a part. We're happy to lead on parts of it, but we need to work with the industry to actually make it work. But some of the highlights on that for us is we've looked at it. Between now and 2030, we need to add 10,000 megawatts of additional renewable generation on the system. We need to reinforce the grid, and I'm thankful I was here this morning. I recognise the challenges are there. We do need to reinforce the grid to support that. We need to deliver more interconnection. So we've recently, as Eamon mentioned earlier, been successful in terms of a large grant from the EU for the Celtic Interconnector, and we're working on that. But we need more forms of interconnection, and we need to support other forms of interconnection to come onto the system. To achieve 70% by 2030, really we need to get to a point that we have 95%. That's the target we've set of renewables on the system at any one point in time. The market is going to have to evolve to support that and to attract people to actually want to invest in the market, and we recognise that. But if we're going to be part of that, we need to look at ourselves and what we do as a company, and we need to be a leader in terms of actually reducing our own emissions. And that's a very important thing. We can't actually convince others, and there's a huge element of actually convincing people unless we can actually do it ourselves. The first supporting goal is about operating, developing and enhancing the All-Ireland electricity grid and market. I suppose the big part of this is if we just focus on 2025 and 2030 and we don't get the day job right, we've failed. We have to make sure that we're actually continuing to progress on the grid development side, all of the connections and all of the new wind and other forms of generation onto the system. Same on the demand side. On the market side, it needs to evolve. So this is a check for ourselves to make sure that we're always actually focused on the day job, not just the dream of what 2025 or 2030 is. In terms of working with partners for positive change, We have a number of partnerships already. We've been working very hard with ESB networks and NIE networks over the last number of years to evolve the working arrangements. We have a good partnership there, and we need to recognise that partnership as TSO to TAO and TSO to DSO. And the DSO bit is going to become more and more important as well as we look at where the grid has to evolve. Another partnership, and the one we've worked on over the last number of years, is with RTE in France for the interconnector, but we need to look at other partnerships with other transmission operators. The customers on the generation is a huge partnership we need to actually further develop, and we need to collaborate, and that's why it's a great opportunity for me to be here today to figure out actually how can we actually start collaborating with the people who want to bring more generation onto the system. And also the same with the demand customers as well, and figuring out how can we actually fit in and meet the demands. We need more national partners to actually help foster the whole idea of engaging and why we actually need to build new infrastructure. I'm going to talk about that more in a second. But we also recognise that we need to develop partnerships to evolve our own system and to evolve the market to be able to sustain 95% renewables by 2030. I think Ireland has recognised we're coming a long way already, and it's probably leading that, but we need help and support. So next week we're going out to tender for an international partner to help us on that journey. I think one of the biggest challenges we have is about engaging for the better outcomes of all. How do we convince people that we need to invest in the industry, that we need to build new infrastructure? That's a huge challenge. EGR has had a huge challenge in that on the last number of years. But very, very simply, we're at a point now where with our strategy we're saying we can't deliver on the climate action plan and we can't deliver on our own strategy if we can't actually build new infrastructure and connect the 10,000 additional megawatts of generation. We recognise that, but we need to work with partners like yourselves and with national partners to convince that this is the right thing to do. We've evolved our own strategy in terms of engaging with people, and we've put a lot of work into that. And I keep saying we because I'm part of EirGrid now, but I recognise I wasn't involved in that, to take us forward from some of the challenges we've had in the past. I can say from what I've seen, it's starting to work and it's working quite well. But we need to go beyond that, as well as actually engaging in the communities. We need to do something on the island of Ireland that kind of captures the intent to actually reach 2030 and the national intent to actually reduce our carbon emissions. And we need to work with the department, different parts in government and national bodies that will help to actually focus that, because if we can't actually get people aligned with that, we won't be able to build the infrastructure we need to build. Just in terms of the grid of the future, you've probably seen something like this before, but that's a huge change from the system we would have had 10, 15, 20 years ago. The grid has changed a lot. The grid was built originally to have large thermal generation units. Now we're going to have multiple forms of different generation units spread all over the country. There's an increased reliance on actually moving to electric vehicles and electrification of heat, primarily probably through the distribution system, but the TSO is going to have to support that and work very collaboratively with the DSO to make sure that actually works. But the grid isn't actually designed for that as well, so we need to look at that. And there's also focusing on some of the other things, such as demand response and interconnection. That's why we need new infrastructure. One of the primary things we're trying to do is trying to reuse as much existing infrastructure as possible. And I know it was touched on earlier that it's worked for now. That's not going to be enough to reach 2030. We need more than that. Just to touch on offshore, I know it's come up a couple of times today. So we've been set a target under the Climate Action Plan to propose an option paper in terms of the offshore grid model that's required. So we've appointed an international consultant, and we're working with them, and we're interacting with the CRU, with the department, and with ESB networks, trying to evolve that. And we have a target to deliver that next year to help actually influence the regulatory and the policy framework. This is just an outline of where we've actually got to with the consultant to date. So we're kind of firmed up now on 1 and 2 in terms of what the assessment is going to be about, the Irish context. And over the next couple of months, we're actually, we've an awful lot of meetings set up with them to actually go through all of the details and all of the different options there, with the idea that early next year, in line with the target that we've been set, to have a model for us actually to deliver and actually for on the onward consultation. I think the final thing I just want to say before finishing is that recognise some of the points that are made today. With our new strategy now, it's EirGrid's intention to respond and work with the industry to bring the extra 10,000 megawatts onto the system. Thank you.